I can't seem to shut up about this scope, so let's just have it all out right now. This is the much vaunted Athlon Helos BTR Gen 2 2-12 by 42 millimeter FFP IR rifle scope, and this one just happens to be in mils. This is Milleradians. They do have one in MOA that is the exact same thing, except that it's an MOA reticle and MOA turrets. So what is up with this thing and why am I crazy about it? This is a scope that, as you can see, it's a tactical scope. It has big old tactical turrets, it has side parallax adjustment, it has illumination. It just looks like a tactical scope, but this is something that you really need to seriously consider for certain kinds of hunting. Actually, for a whole lot of different kinds of hunting. If you want a scope that you can slap on top of a very versatile rifle, like your 308 tactical rifle or some kind of hunting rifle, and you want it to be useful in a whole bunch of situations, this scope is going to do it, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, so the tactical part, it's a 30 millimeter tube, great start. There are tons of accessories for that, including this Athlon 20 MOA mount that you see here. I've mounted this on my 6 millimeter ARC rifle, and if you're not keeping up with that series, you really need to take a look. I think 6 millimeter ARC in a lot of ways is the future. It's something that can be used for a broad variety of hunting, and this scope is going to be a perfect match for it. Its overall form factor is 2-12 by 42 millimeters, so it's a little bit of a smaller bell on this end. It's a little bit of a smaller objective lens than, say, your typical 3-12. You might get a 3-12 by 44 millimeter, a little bit bigger. But this one works out just fine. This works at sundown, it works as things get dark. These lenses gobble up a whole lot of light. The Gen 2 glass that you get on a lot of these Athlons is much better than in the past. This absorbs a lot of light, it recreates everything really well, very little chromatic aberration. In fact, let's just go there right now. Let's take a look at the chart that I shot with this. You can see that at maximum magnification, there's plenty of resolution, you can see lots of details. You're going to be able to see lots of contrast. And as we back off, take a look at this. The image is bright, it's clear, there's no color cast at all. This is a very realistic image. It just feels like when you pull this up to your eye that you're just looking at objects that are far away, and that is about the highest praise that I can give a scope. If it simply makes things look like they're closer, then that's a good scope. The resolution on here is high enough that I can easily see even just, kind of a relatively low 12x. I can still see lots of mirage. I can see all kinds of wind indicators going on out there. And since this does a good job of recreating the image, kind of bringing everything together with pretty low chromatic aberration, things that are out of focus, I can still kind of see what they are. I can still see that, okay, this is grass out of focus, not a prismatic effect where things are getting like, fringing pink and green and all kinds of funky things. This one maintains a really good out of focus image. That image continues to work whether it's bright, if it's overcast, if it's getting dark. This functions down in those lower light areas just because of the quality of the glass and how much light transmission they can get back to the eye. And speaking of the eye, it's easy to get behind this scope. This has a pretty high zoom ratio, and you might expect that it could be a little tough, maybe at 12x, to get behind this, maybe move your face around a bunch, and no, it's not like that at all. You can very easily get your face back here, find the exact position that you're after, and as long as you set up your rifle right, you can just swing this up and take the shot. It's going to be good to go. This has a little bit of a smaller eye relief than some of the other scopes, like the Nitro that I was talking about. That one's going to be good for your magnums because it's a 3.9 inch eye relief. You're going to be able to get the scope pretty far away from the eye. This one's 3.6, which is fine. I have shot magnums with a 3.6 inch eye relief. That's just great. Just make sure that you're braced up behind it. But if you have kind of a medium cartridge, okay, great. If you have a 308, 6 millimeter ARC, 6.5 Grendel, you're not going to be worried about getting scope kissed. Everything's going to be fine. It's just if you have that magnum, yeah, make sure that you do brace up. Now, before I got lost talking about the image quality, I was talking about how I didn't expect it to look quite so good because, this probably has some smaller lenses on the inside. And I was also talking about how much tracking you get with these turrets. The turrets are really, really nice. They're big. You can see that on the mil version, we have 10 milliradians all the way around. These lock. So I can unlock them by pulling up, and this has graduations on the back, which makes me really happy. I always want one of these, big scopes that has these big target turrets. I want to be able to see where I'm tracking up and down. I want to be able to see how many revolutions I've dialed on here, and this has it. Each one of the clicks has a little bit of wiggle to it. It seems like it's locked on the inside. It feels more like it's the cap itself that's a little bit on the loose side. It does snap into place. It's very audible. So if you have some kind of hearing enhancement, hearing protection, like the Champion Vanquish that I've tested or the Axel GS Extreme, you're gonna be able to hear those clicks very clearly. And while you can skip over one or two while you're clicking around, for the most part, it is very precise and it locks in really neatly. This has that lock, like I mentioned, so you can just push down and it'll stay locked and it's not gonna spin on you anymore. And that's for both the elevation and the windage. But on the elevation, you also get a zero stop. And it's a brilliant zero stop that will let you do pretty much whatever you want. I'm gonna show you how that works right here. I have this all zeroed out. The turrets are correct on the inside, but on the outside you can see that they're showing some pretty screwy numbers. And that's just how everything aligned. So what I have to do is first unscrew this screw at the top and take off the cap. Now if I wanted to just go ahead and set 0, then I could just plop this back down and screw this down. However, there is a zero stop. So what I'm going to do is fix this plate into the right position, and then from now on, when I turn the turrets all the way down, if I want to get back to 100 yards, it's just going to click right into place. So what I have to do first is unscrew these set screws that you see here. There are 5 of these set screws all the way around, and they take a 1/8 inch Allen key. So you just take this, loosen it up, and once you have all of them loose, then this disc will spin. It'll come up and down to wherever you're supposed to be, and since we're locked down right now at 0, this is where 0 is supposed to be, I want this flush down to the bottom, and then we're going to rotate this until this little guy comes in contact with that block. Now, one other thing to keep in mind, if you have, if you're one of those guys that likes to set your scope so that it doesn't just stop on 0, but it allows you to actually walk back a little bit, so you can go 1 extra milliradian down or whatever, then you should probably do that first and then set this up. But it will allow you to hit that spot. But since I want 0 all the way around, okay, that's my spot. And now all I have to do is just tighten these set screws back down. And I need to make sure that this plate remains flush while I do so. When you're setting your final torque, make sure you're only using the small end of the Allen key. You can see how short this is. So I'm going to insert kind of the long end in there, and I'm going to use just this tiny little nubbin, and that's going to be the amount of torque that I put on it. This is not something that is going to be able to take a lot of abuse. This is a brass fitting with steel screws. I can easily damage either the housing that this is connecting to, or I can damage the ring itself and damage the threads if I torque this too much. But that is it. That is the 0 stop set. All right, let's put the cap back on, spun the right direction, and there is my 0 point. Lining up all nicely with the line down there. And this does have those graduations. I love these. It's nice to have these on a precision scope. So I've got this in place, and now I just need to tighten down the screw. All right, let's give this a test drive. If we push down, the lock is on, won't spin. Pull up, there we go. It'll go past 0, and then when I get to 0, click. That's it. The windage side is even easier. Just loosen the screw. There is no 0 stop. All you have to do is just turn the turret cap back into the right spot, pop it on the splines, and then you're zeroed. I've been shooting all around the turret adjustment range. Let's just go ahead and get it out of the way. 32 milliradians of elevation and 25 milliradians of windage, which is a lot. A lot of your big tactical scopes have to have a 34mm tube in order to pull off that kind of thing, and this one does it with a 30, and it does it well. Check out the clicks here. You can see me tracking through my tracking test. This might not have been exactly at 100 yards. I think it was pretty darn close. But yeah, you can see that it's hitting the spots on the chart. I'm getting out to 3 milliradians, coming back, and this works on both the elevation and the windage. This scope is reliable in all the situations that you might find yourself, both with the reticle and with these turrets. Each click is 0.1 milliradians if you have the mil version. If you have the MOA, it's the usual quarter MOA, so everything's standard there. This is not really designed to be a target scope. This is designed for practical field use and for tactical use, and they've really nailed the setup here. Let's take a look at some of the other controls on here that continue that precision and that good feel. The side parallax adjustment is nice and smooth. It's not likely that you're gonna mess up your rifle by having to crank on this to get it into the right spot. And check this out. This scope will actually dial all the way back to 10 yards, so you can actually focus on some very, very close objects, even at 12x. Now, once you're back down on 2x, everything is in focus anyway, so don't worry about that. But yeah, if you want to be able to get very precisely on target with an air rifle or something, then yeah, you can go ahead and crank this back. So if you have a 22 and you've been looking for a tactical style scope, this may be your ticket. 10 yards, that's fantastic. But yeah, feels smooth all the way through. The one thing that I'll mention about rolling parallax on this is that because it is kind of a lower magnification scope overall, and even at 12x, you're gonna get a lot of things in focus, and that can actually make parallax a little bit more tricky. So if I'm at 12x and I'm looking at a target at 500 meters, the 400 meter target might actually still be in focus, even at that maximum magnification. And I don't necessarily want that. I want to make sure that I'm actually going to have my parallax right, because if those focal planes are not perfectly lined up and my eye is off just a little bit, it might look like I'm aiming at the target, but I'm actually aiming to the side of it and I'm going to miss. So if you do have a really precise shot on a long target, and what I recommend is that you settle the rifle down, move your eye behind the scope and see if the crosshair is moving. If it is, dial this in little by little until you get the exact right parallax adjustment. It will be in focus. That's not going to be a problem, but you might have to work just a little bit to get your perfect parallax. Once you do, this is going to nail it. This scope is very precise in everything that I've done so far. Some of the other controls as we move around, we have the illumination. So on the inside there, that was parallax adjustment. To the outside, this is illumination. Each one of the dots is going to be off, and then each one of the numbers is going to be a level of illumination. And this is just red on the inside. So it's going to light up that center dot, it's going to light up that circle. And that means that when you are down at a ridiculously low magnification like 2x, I told you before that if we have a high zoom ratio scope, like a 6x, this is 2 to 12, that's a 6x zoom ratio, it's really easy to have a reticle that's too thick when you're zoomed in and a reticle that's too small to be seen when you're zoomed out. So the way that these guys have fixed this is they have added illumination and a couple extra elements. So you have a center dot for your target, and then you have this kind of thicker circle that goes around it. So if you're backed off all the way to 2x, you're still gonna have a good aiming point, especially if you have illumination turned on. So even for daylight use, the illumination might be really smart to switch on. The magnification that goes from 2 to 12 is extremely smooth. I feel no hitches. Everything's easy to turn. This is something that's going to be very easy to manipulate out in the field without losing the target. The side parallax, same thing. Whatever you do back here, it's not going to mess up your rifle and knock you off target. You're still going to be able to see what you're doing. And since this is FFP, it's pretty likely that you're going to want to kind of get this around to a point where you can see what you want before you take your shot, and you're not really going to be concerned about what the actual magnification is, according to the numbers on here. And it's going to work for that. There is an optional throw lever that you can attach. At the time it wasn't available when I picked this up, but that would make this even faster. So this is going to be really fast for tactical use, and maybe you get into a situation where a hog is charging you, it's going to be easy to crank this back down to 2. Back here on this end, the eyepiece is a fast focus, and it's really fast, so watch out. Make sure you don't actually spin this out in the field by it rubbing against your clothes or anything. I haven't had any problems yet, but I gotta say, watch out. You might want to mark where your spot is once you find your right diopter. I've mentioned that this is an FFP scope. That's your only option with the Helios here. You have MOA or MRAD. Both of them feature the same kind of reticle with a circle, a dot. You get hash lines on the crosshairs, and you get a Christmas tree descending from the middle. And that is a setup that I love very much for flexible types of hunting. For tactical use, yes, it's going to be great. You're going to be able to use the special lines down at the bottom in order to find your range to the target. And then you're going to be able to use the Christmas tree to hold off and hold over so you can get your elevation and your windage without even having to touch these dials. I've done both. I've dialed out in the field. I have used the reticle alone, and both of them work perfectly. They both work perfectly in concert. So if you're a dialer, you can go ahead and crank that up and then just use maybe the hash lines for windage, or you can do both, and it works. The one thing that I will mention about the reticle, remember that this is FFP, so it's going to stretch and shrink along with the target. Once you are on that high end, once you're at 12x, it is a little bit on the thick side, which kind of shows its tactical nature. For tactical use, we're dealing with this as a target, which is quite large. And so if you're dealing with things that are smaller than that, it's pretty easy to cover them with that center dot. I found that when I was doing some of my target testing, just shooting at paper, that I had to be pretty careful about where I was aligned with that center dot. Sometimes I'd have to hold off a little bit and say, okay, yeah, that's the spot, and then hold on there and take the shot. Once you do that though, it is very precise. And if you're dealing with larger targets like hogs, deer, and two-legged varmints, then yeah, there's plenty for that. You're not going to be covering up your target so much. And this is going to be perfectly functional out to 1,000 yards and possibly beyond. Because of the thickness of the reticle, I personally wouldn't go beyond 1,000 yards. I think it would just get a little bit too tough. A 1 MOA target is going to be invisible. It's just, I'm not going to be able to see it behind that center dot in there. But for all practical uses, this is going to be great, and I can use this for varminting too. Not a perfect varminting scope, but it's still going to be perfectly functional. Now for some of the details. This has a lot of features and functions, so it's not a light scope. It is 25.4 ounces. That puts it almost actually the exact same weight as that Bushnell Nitro, and both of them are a little bit on the heavy side for hunting. A lot of your average hunters are going to have that 3 to 9. And that could weigh anywhere between 13 ounces up to, maybe in the high teens, somewhere in there. 25.4 ounces is definitely in that kind of tactical vein. Those usually do way more. It's really not that bad though. For me, the biggest problem is actually the weight of my rifle. It's heavier than I wanted it to be, but the scope itself, I think it's good weight. It just has so much that it can do that it's fine. This is argon purged on the inside, and let's talk a little bit about the lens coatings on here. It is fully multi-coated, as you might expect. The glass is very high quality. It seems to be a very high density of glass, very low porosity. That's why we have such a good resolution to it. And this has 2 extra tricks. The coatings that are on the outsides of these lenses seem to be good at kind of 2 extra things. It seems to function a lot like the exo barrier on the Bushnell scopes. So they claim that this is going to repel a lot of the nastiness that's going to be out in the real world. So it should repel thumbprints, and if you spill oil on it or solvents or whatever, it should continue to function. And it also does a really good job of just absorbing light without getting into a lot of light leaks and bounces. So if you have especially at the lower magnifications. If you have the sun just off axis, where normally it's gonna blow a scope out, and you're not gonna be able to see that deer that's come down to drink, and the sun is just off over here. On a lot of scopes, it's gonna completely blow that out, and you won't be able to see the deer, or you'll barely be able to see it. This kills that. It makes it so you can just plain see the deer. And if you crank it up to its highest magnification, you may see some spots. But in general, I found if I just moved my eye a little bit, it went away and I could take the shot. The lens coatings on here are just primo. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm gonna be able to drag this anywhere into any conditions and it'll function. This is waterproof as well. They didn't do the full IP rating, so they haven't spent the money to send it off and get it all tested and everything. But it sounds like this should perform pretty well like your IPX7 sort of thing. This should be able to handle whatever you can throw at it. You should be able to drop it into a puddle. It can get rained on, things can happen to it, and it will be fine. Like I mentioned at the start of the 6mm ARC series, there are times that I go out to a ranch or some area and I don't know exactly what I'm going to be getting into. There may be multiple different animals in season, or maybe it's an animal that doesn't have a season at all, like hogs. Around here you can kill them at night with a fully automatic rifle from your side-by-side on public land. You can do some insane things. They want the hogs gone, so you can do just about anything you want. And they can appear at unexpected times. And that is what this scope is gonna be able to do. If I need to deal with a hog at very close distance, no problem. If I wanna be able to deal with them at longer distance, I can do that. This scope is gonna be able to do it all. With this, I can hunt deer, I can hunt hogs, I can hunt coyotes, and it's not gonna fall down in any of those cases. So maybe the weather turns bad for deer and I want to pop a coyote. Okay, great, I can do it. With that 6mm ARC cartridge and this scope, I'm gonna be on. It's gonna work. Thanks a lot for watching, you guys. Make sure that you check out more videos because we have some more scope reviews coming. I've got a Zerotech Trace Advanced that I'm gonna be getting into next. Got a bunch of things going on. Hopefully some more Athlons we'll be taking a look at in the future. Just a lot of exciting things going on, so make sure that you find out what these are all about. Thank you to patrons of Destructive Arts for making videos like these possible. I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Even if you didn't like this particular content, go ahead and subscribe. There's probably something coming that's more up your alley. Check out this playlist right here. This is going to have videos in a similar vein to what you just watched. These two videos we cherry-picked for you. And finally, The Social Regressive is on Patreon. So you can become a patron of the Destructive Arts and earn some goodies while helping us to provide high-quality videos just by kicking us a few bucks a month. Thanks a bunch for your patronage.